Thank you very much, Dave. I am honored to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming out to hear our views on education, which are so important and for many of us very different. As Dave said, my name is Dr. Jennifer Boddicker. I am running for Florida House District 80, which is northeast Collier County, north of Alligator Alley, east of Livingston, up through Immokalee, and all of Hendry County. I have a PhD in microbiology from the University of Iowa, where I taught and did research for 10 years. And then my family moved to Florida 5 years ago. My husband is an accountant and a Gulf War veteran. He was in the Army for 8 years. We have 2 beautiful children who are in the audience tonight and have already done their homework sitting here tonight. They are enrolled in Collier County Public Schools. And as a family, we feel very blessed to live in this wonderful community with so many civic-minded people who care so much about what happens in our state and here within our school district. But you don't have to live here for very long to know that some things need to change. And one of the things that I feel really needs some work actually is the education system. And that's because we are ranked about 26th by Education Weekly in terms of overall educational assessments. And beyond that, our teachers are paid pretty poorly here in the state. Depending on what ranking you look at, mid-40s compared to other states. Also, our per pupil spending is about 43rd compared to other states. And so that means that we are attaining at best a sort of level of mediocrity overall in the state. Now, I recognize Collier County has quite good schools, but we have some work to do so that all the schools in the state of Florida really measure up and are as good as the national average, and that we are able to pay our teachers appropriately so that we don't continue to have a teacher shortage here in Florida. And those are some things that I will focus on as your legislator. Thank you very much. I look forward to answering more questions.
Thank you, Dr. Boddicker. Next is Byron Donalds. Mr. Donalds.
Thank you, Dave. It's good seeing you again. It's been a while. I also want to thank everybody for joining us this evening here and able to discuss education policy. My name is Byron Donalds. I'm the current incumbent representing Florida House District 80. Essentially, right now you're sitting in Florida House District 80, so welcome to the district. And it covers Eastern Collier County as well as all of Hendry County. My last year in the legislature, I served as vice chairman for pre-K through 12 appropriations in the Florida House. I'm one of the core members in the legislature that spends a lot of their time actually going through education policy from a statewide perspective and also looking at the funding formulas in education, not just K-12, but also in early learning as well, so we can make sure that we're providing a quality education to all of Florida students. My philosophy in education is quite simple, and it's making sure that every child has a school that they deserve and a quality education that can help them be successful in life. And so my time in the legislature and policies that I've written and other policies that I've supported with my colleagues is focused on one thing, and that's making sure that all our children have that opportunity to succeed in life and that their parents are empowered for them to succeed in life the way my mother did for me when I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. The last thing I'll say, because of course, this is solely focused on education, so we're going to get to a lot of questions tonight, and I'm excited for that. I do want to congratulate my opponent for making sure that her kids did their homework before they got here tonight, because it's that critical. It takes parents to be very hands-on with their children for their children to be successful. I know that firsthand from my upbringing, and I want to commend everybody that does that hard work. So I'm looking forward to the debate, and thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Donalds. Ms. McFadden is not here yet, I don't believe, so we will move to Bob Rommel. Mr. Rommel.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for being here, and thank everybody for coming out to District 80 and spending some time here as we discuss the education needs here in Florida. My name is Bob Rommel. I was elected to the Florida House in 2016. Before that, I've been a perpetual entrepreneur. I've hired thousands and thousands of people over the last 25 years of my life, and I have a different outlook in education than some. As an employer, I know how hard it is to fill jobs, whether it's teachers, auto mechanics, engineers, doctors, nurses. We have a great need here, not only in Florida, but everywhere in our country, to make sure our children are properly educated So when they get out of school, whether it's high school or post high school, college, they're trained for the jobs that are out there. And right now in Florida, we have hundreds of thousands of job openings. We're not producing the product that the employers out there have a need for. And we need to do a better job of that. Looking forward to this debate. I know a lot of you were there last night, so the topics tonight are going to be just pure education. Looking forward to the questions and looking forward to a great night. Thank you.
Mr. Ronald, thank you. Annisa Karim.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Annisa Karim. I'm running for Florida State Senate District 28. Many of you think of me as a scientist, a wildlife ecologist, and obviously the environment is one of my passions. But the reason I'm a wildlife ecologist is because I was able to go to amazing public schools. I moved to Florida when I was 5 years old, and through hard work and dedication, I saw my parents force me to do my homework every day, and even a little more, which I wasn't always happy about. But that drive to make sure that we had everything that we needed to make sure that we were successful is something I think that I have as well. I am a member of the first graduating class of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and when I learned about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, as I'm sure you have, you know that she had dedication and tenacity to go after the things that she wanted to fight for and fight hard for. And that's why I'm here today. I want to fight for you and on the future of Florida. We know that education is the key. The key, quality public education is the key to the long-term viability of our community. That's where everything starts. And if we don't give our kids a decent, good, fair start, they have less of a chance to achieve the goals that they have set for themselves. Every child deserves the opportunity through hard work and innovation to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. But in a state where we're ranked 40th in education, that is mediocre. That is something that our kids need us to do better. So that's why I'm running for the state senate. I'm running to make sure that we get better as a state because our kids deserve more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Karim. And Kathleen Passadella.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is a really important issue. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the statistics and then we can get into the actual discussion. The United States Census Bureau recently released a comparison of education expenditures among states. As two of our candidates have said earlier, Florida ranked 41st in revenues and spending. The National Education Association ranked Florida 41 overall in expenditures in 2017. Despite these dismal numbers, and what you haven't heard from others, is that Florida ranked 4th in the nation for K-12 student achievement, according to Education Week's Quality Counts 2018 report. The 2017 National Assessment of Educational Progress Assessment reports Florida was the only state to improve significantly in grade 4 mathematics, grade 8 reading, and grade 8 mathematics. In June 2018, the Department of Education released school grades for the 2017-2018 school year. Florida has more than 1,000 A schools, up from 987 in 2017. The percentage of schools earning an A increased to 32%, up from 30% the previous year. The number of F schools decreased by 23%. With regard to our colleges and universities, I am so proud to report that Florida was graded #1 in the country for higher education. So, imagine how much better it would be if we paid teachers more, if we celebrated the professions. And I will tell you that last year, for the first time in 7 years, I was on an education committee. I was asked to chair pre-K through 12. My budget had increases for teacher salary. It increased budget for VPK. It increased classroom supplies. Unfortunately, Parkland occurred and my budget was changed. But I will be back and it will be better. Thank you.
All right, we'll begin the questioning now, and we're going to start with Mr. Donalds. We'll go down the table and back around, and then we'll progress. Each person will get a chance to start first and then last here. So here's the first question for Mr. Donalds, and everybody will get a chance to answer this. Despite recently passed legislation, Florida ranks 30th in the nation regarding the quality of its public schools. according to the 2018 annual study Quality Counts by the journal Education Week. What will you do to improve Florida's ranking?
Thank you so much for the question. I don't want to get heavily into which study we're going to follow. The key thing is this. Number one is that the data is showing that Florida is making steady improvements with respect to the achievement of their students. The study you cite says that we're 30th. The NAEP testing that just came out earlier this year states that in 4th and 8th grade that we're 4th in the country in terms of achievement of our students moving forward. We are the one state that's actually proven by data to show that we are actually beginning to really close achievement gaps in the state of Florida. One of the things we have to look at going forward before we get into teacher salaries and hiring new teachers is actually being consistent not only with respect to choice options, which have shown and have demonstrated that it is more likely for students in choice options to be able to go to college. The data shows that as well. I think the last thing we want to make sure we do is make sure that our standards are top-notch in the country, and we should be reviewing those consistently over time to make sure that our students are getting the best.
Mr. Rommel.
Great. Thank you for that question. And I want to piggyback a little bit on what Representative Donald said. If we keep reading, there's multiple reports out there. One report says we're 4th, one says that we're 30th, one says we're this. I can tell you that the students are getting a better education, and we are spending more money. But we do have to be careful where we spend our money. Our student growth, the amount of people that we're hiring in our schools is outpacing our student growth. We're hiring more administrators. We're hiring more people that aren't teachers. We have to get back to what's important, teachers. Teachers are important. A lot of other things are important, but we need to make sure we spend more time, more money on teaching and not, fancy buildings, not administrators, and, not all those other things. So reports are reports, but, education is getting better, and it will definitely be improved.
Ms. Karim?
Thank you. And that is the most important question of the night, right? That is the first question. How do we get better? We stop high-stakes testing. High-stakes testing is not helping our children. It's not helping the professionals that we have in the classroom trying to educate those children. Those teachers are professionals. They know what they're doing. So we need to stop high-stakes testing. There has to be some measure of accountability. We can go back to testing at 3rd, 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. We can set standards, but we don't need high-stakes testing. We need to allow teachers to do the jobs that they are paid for, horribly paid for right now. Hopefully we can get that better as well. But we need to allow these professionals to do the jobs that they're paid for and give them the class sizes that they deserve, better class sizes, and make sure that we're actually adhering to the class size amendment that we passed. We have to make sure that we keep public money in public schools where we can hold them accountable. We set high standards, we make sure our tax dollars are going to public schools and hold those schools accountable. That's how we get better.
Thank you. Ms. Pasadena?
Thank you. And I'm glad that Annisa mentioned high-stakes testing, because last 2 sessions ago we passed a bill to reduce the number of tests that students were required to take, because we're right. We can't keep testing students so often that they don't learn. So that is something that we did, something we recognized. The question was about, rankings, and, I understand that there are very many different statistics, and they've been bandied about all along. The bottom line is that the quality of our education in Florida is increasing dramatically. And frankly, the teachers are doing it without being compensated the way they should be. I think we all acknowledge that, and that's going to be something that we're going to work on in the future. And secondly, we have to re-look at the delivery of education in this state. It's too archaic, and it doesn't take into account the students of the future. And that's something that I'm committed to do as we move forward. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Bonner.
Right, this is a very important question. And you look at the different rankings, we have improved, but we are still far behind where we should be in terms of how our students are doing and how our teachers are doing in this state. So to improve education overall in this state, I think we have to do a number of of things, and that's going to be hard to sum up in 2 minutes, but we need to appropriately compensate our teachers and appropriately value and respect them. And we also need to spend more per pupil for every student. And the fact is that even though we are spending more total dollars on education, we are not keeping up with inflation. So we aren't even to the level of spending that we were pre-recession in terms of per pupil spending when you factor in inflation. So we have to make sure that we spend more on public education, and there are a variety of ways that we can reassess our budgets in order to get there. Thank you.
Very good. We'll move on to our second question now. The legislature sometimes mandates educational policies and programs while providing little or no funding to implement what is required. Sometimes you hear the term unfunded mandates. How do you propose to remedy this issue, given that the state budget must be balanced by law? Now, we were to start with Ms. McFadden, who is not here, so I think we'll skip to Mr. Rommel, and you'll get that first question. Would you like the question again?
No, you don't need, but if you can give an example, what you mean by an unfunded mandate.
There was no example given in the question.
All right. Well, we do have to legislate and give out rules, but we believe in local school boards running the schools the way they want to. So if you can't give me an example of an unfunded mandate, it's really difficult to answer the question.
All right, Ms. Karim?
So we need to stop duplicating our efforts, basically. We are spending public tax dollars on public education in quality public schools, and then we're spending public tax dollars on for-profit charter schools, for-profit religious schools. We have a voucher system that eats up $1 billion of our education budget, and that goes to schools that aren't accountable. That's how we start. And then at the legislative level, we make sure that every mandate that we pass actually has funding. We are sitting in an amazing county for public education. If you look at the innovation that Collier County has implemented over the last few years, it is quite amazing. I invite you to go and visit some of the high schools and the programs that they're implementing. Dr. Patton has done a fantastic job. That's not happening everywhere around the state. Collier County can be the model, but at the legislative level, we stop funding those mandates and we stop duplicating public efforts with public dollars.
Ms. Pasadena?
Thank you. That issue comes up periodically when looking at the base student allocation and the Florida Educational Finance Program, which is what people use to determine what monies we are providing to our students or to our schools and how they spend them. And last year, the quote unfunded mandate was some misreview, I would say, of the budget, and a comment that we only had an increase of, I think it was 47 cents. That did not take into consideration some of the dollars that we put into the budget that were not included in the base student allocation. I know I'm in the weeds, but you need to understand. So we included a $9 million increase to the teacher classroom supplies funding, $69 million for mental health, a total increase of $101.50. So there were no unfunded mandates, they were just put in different places, and there was funds there to cover the expenditures we requested.
Dr. Bonner?
Yes, so my understanding is that we are required to have school resource officers now after the shooting in Parkland, and that some counties and school districts within our state are having trouble finding the funds in order to hire school resource officers because we didn't provide enough money from the state, and that would be an example of an unfunded mandate. I think that is a bad thing for the state legislature to put onto different counties, because different counties have different levels of wealth and ability to contribute to any particular mandate that the state might set for them. And I believe that the legislature shouldn't do that to begin with. And secondly, that we can increase the amount of money that we have to spend on whatever we want to do, as Ms. Karim said, by not duplicating our efforts and taking back some of the money that we have put into school voucher programs, which are unaccountable to the taxpayer in terms of how the students are doing. Thank you.
Mr. Donalds?
Thank you for the question. A couple of things. First of all, to address the situation with unfunded mandates, one of the things that I know I'm looking forward to doing in the next couple of legislative sessions is actually changing slightly some of the funding categories in the FEFP. The state does put mandates on portions of local funding, and whether it's dealing with class size, whether it's dealing with instructional materials. Another one now is school safety. Another one is mental health. We have one for uniform allocations. And so one of the things that I want to do is actually clean a lot of those out and provide districts have flexibility in their budgets so they can go ahead and freely address the needs of their local school district. And this is the conversation I have with many superintendents. But I also challenge them, don't come back to the legislature and say you don't have money for this thing, because you have to be stewards of your dollars the same way the state has to be. The second thing I would say briefly is the argument about duplication is a false choice. Our system actually runs on funding students who are present in the school. So schools aren't, so if a child isn't present in that school, the school's not getting that money anyway. If a parent decides they want to take their child to a choice option, that is something that the parent is deciding as a state we should continue to promote. That is not duplication.
Thank you. Time's up. What we're going to do is we're going to use the same rotation we just did, because if I don't, my feeble brain won't keep track of how far off we are. So, Mr. Rommel, you will get the next first question again, then we'll be back on track.
Okay.
What is your view on a state-funded universal pre-K program?
My view is that we need more school choice. Okay. Education is the only thing that there's a lack of choice. In Florida, we have 43 failing schools. Year after year after year, the superintendents say we need more money, yet the schools continue to fail. School choice gives the students the opportunity to live on the wrong side of the track to have a better education. On the state level, we should allocate X amount of dollars per student and then let those school districts decide. But school choice is definitely an important option. Just because you grew up on the wrong side, or there's not the option for a better education, shouldn't be limited by the size of your school where you live in.
Can I ask a 15-second follow-up here, and that is, could you define school choice for us, please?
Sure. Parents should be able to send their kids to the best place that they think is necessary for their children.
Within the district?
Within the district.
Okay. Ms. Karim?
So the question was about state-funded universal pre-K, is that correct?
State-funded universal pre-K.
Okay, so yeah, I am in favor of state-funded universal pre-K. We have to set the highest standards for our children, no matter how old they are. Universal pre-K is a must to make sure that our children get the good start that they need. Right now, there are a lot of private organizations that claim that they are doing universal pre-K, they have some pre-K program, and they're getting state money for it. And again, there's no accountability. And so if we're giving public tax dollars to an organization that claims that they're providing some sort of pre-kindergarten education, there should be accountability. And if the legislature won't enact that, we need to make sure that universal pre-K, everybody starts on the same page. I have 15 seconds, and I do want to say that the duplication of efforts is not a false choice. If we have the same program being offered in a charter school and a public school, then the public school should have those dollars, because the public school is ultimately held accountable at a higher standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pasadomo?
Thank you, and thanks again, Annisa, for congratulating me on the bill I passed last year for the Early Learning Coalition for accountability for voluntary pre-K schools. And I got a big award for it because it's adding accountability to the system. I absolutely support voluntary PK mandatorily, but we can't afford it. It's $800 million to make it mandatory. But what we did last year in my budget, we put in an additional $10.3 million for VPK to increase the school year-based student allocation from $2,437 to $2,500, which is unfortunately where it was back when it was first started. It didn't make it into the final budget because of Parkland, and we'll talk about that. But we did provide an additional $1.6 million for 630 additional full-time equivalents for the next year. I mean, that is one of my big deals, and I'm going to follow up on it, but we can't do it mandatory.
Dr. Bodker?
Yes, I support mandatory pre-K. I think it's a great idea. I think we do have to explore the budget ramifications of that and how we can afford it. $800 million, yeah. Well, we spend almost $1 billion a year on school voucher programs. So, and $25 billion overall on our education budget. So I believe if we take a look at all of the money we're spending and more carefully analyze where we want to spend it, it is possible. And we just would have to decide that that's what we wanted to do. In terms of the school duplication effort, or school duplication, my understanding is there are about 150,000 students in the state of Florida who are receiving private school vouchers to the tune of about $1 billion. Whereas we have about 3 million students overall in the state of Florida. So that's an outsized amount of money to spend on a small number of students, sending them to private schools when they could be in public schools instead. And I would say that that's not a very good use of our taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Mr. Donalds.
Hopefully we'll get to the taxpayer scholarship later, so I'll stay focused on universal pre-K. A couple of things. Number one, we actually have 2 different programs for pre-K right now in the state of Florida. The first is school readiness. School readiness starts about the age of 2. Then when a child becomes 4 years old, there's the voluntary pre-K program, which is for 4 and up. It's a voluntary program that parents can choose to send their students to. One of the things that we did in the last legislative session, Senator Pasadena talked about it, she championed it in the Senate, was actually bringing accountability back to the early learning portion of education, which is something we're going to continue to do going forward. The other thing that I'm working on right now is actually creating a funding formula for early learning. That way we can go away from what we currently do, which we just allocate money to the different early learning coalitions. And instead of doing that, putting them much more on a performance funding model, frankly similar to how we fund the K-12 system. What everybody does agree on is that children have to be ready to come into kindergarten. And the biggest work that must be done in our state is making sure that early learning is addressed in a significant way. I know I'm committed to that, and there are many of my colleagues who are committed to that as well.
I wanted to address follow-ups here. If you do wish to answer a previous question, you can answer it on your next round, but you have to answer the current question first, okay? So I know, Ms. Karim, you wanted to respond, so you can do that in that manner.